The court, indicating Mr. Trump. Mr. Stanglass, I met the thank you, Judge. How did you meet the defendant? I met Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago. A client of mine, Ronald Perelman, introduced me to a fellow by the name This Is All at Mar-a-Lago. Of Nick Ribbies. And he introduced me to Mr. Nick, invited me to Mar-a-Lago, and he Trump. And Nick was at that time, if I recollect, he was the president of Resorts Casinos, one of Mr. Trump's hotels and casinos. And do you remember about when that was? I would say that would be in the 80s, 88 or 189. Can you describe your relationship with Mr. Trump over the years for the jury? I have had a great relationship with Mr. Trump over the years, starting in 89. I had an idea of creating a magazine called Trump Style, and I presented it to Mr. Trump. And he liked the idea a lot, and just questioned me who was going to pay for it, because magazines are pretty expensive. So I told him, I said, Mr. Trump, you have all of these hotels, all of these casinos, all of these apartments, you basically have a fixed distribution. So he liked the idea, and we went ahead and launched the magazine on a quarterly basis. And I would see Mr. Trump probably once a quarter at that time to get the cover approved and the content approved. So you did, in fact, launch Trump Style magazine? Did your relationship with Mr. Trump change at all after you acquired the National Enquirer? Well, I should say that over the years, from 89 to when I acquired the National Enquirer in March of 199, over those 10 years I was responsible for. I was the president of a French publishing company. And I had a lot of dealings and discussions with Mr. Trump because as a celebrity in his own right at that time, he was very helpful in introducing me to other executives and other people in New York. And he would always advise me of parties or events or things that I would either go to or send. At that time, editors to that was prior to the National Enquirer. And then when I bought the National Enquirer in March of 1999, one of the first calls that I received was from Mr. Trump. He called me and he says, congratulations, he says, you bought a great magazine. And he knew over the years the editor-in-chief and a few of the editors at the National Enquirer. Now are you familiar with the show The Apprentice? Can you very briefly describe that for the jury? Mr. Trump and Mark Burnett launched The Apprentice show on NBC. It was an instant success. This was in 2000. I had conversations with Mr. Trump about The Apprentice, what the ratings were, and how it was doing. And he was always kind enough to send me the content, show the ratings, and I was able to publish that in the National Enquirer and some of the other magazines, and I received all that content. Obviously, I didn't have to pay for it. And it was a great mutual, beneficial relationship because all of the press about the show and how it was doing was all published also along that time. Then in 2003 or 2004, when Mr. Trump launched The Celebrity Apprentice, then our relationship even started to grow even further because the celebrities that he was firing on the show and the amount of press that the show received and the incredible ratings that it had and what I believed it did for Mr. Trump as a national figure on TV as the boss did a tremendous also help for my magazines because the audience of the National Enquirer and the other celebrity magazines loved Mr. Trump as a major celebrity and followed him religiously, I should say. Then I would add on that a lot of content on the show, whether somebody was going to be fired or terminated or there was some controversy he would have. As the publisher, Mr. Trump was kind enough to give me the information first. So it was very beneficial for my magazines, and that ran from 2004 to 2014. And just to put that in a little bit of context, I'm not sure you said this, but did The Apprentice show involve several contestants that were competing to be hired by Mr. Trump? But even though they hadn't been hired, as people were eliminated as the show went on, he would say you are fired, and they would basically be eliminated from the show %. Is that correct? Now did there come a point during the relationship and the way it evolved that you just described that you came to consider Mr. Trump a friend? Yes, I did. And during the period from 2015 to 2017, did you consider Mr. Trump a friend? Yes, I did. When you spoke with Mr. Trump, what did you call him? I would call him Donald. Prior to 2015, how often would you say you spoke to Mr. Trump? Maybe monthly or quarterly I would speak to Mr. Trump, or if there was an event that came up, if he fired somebody on The Celebrity Apprentice and it was something that was going to get a lot of national news, I would speak to him more often. And how often would you see him during the period from say 2015 to 2017? How often would you see him in person? I would say I would see him maybe either once a month or twice a quarter. Okay, and did that change at some point in 2015? After Mr. Trump announced his run for president, I saw Mr. Trump more frequently, maybe once a month. Did you also communicate with Mr. Trump by telephone? And how often did you do that? Maybe once every couple of weeks. When you spoke to him, did you call him a cell phone, a landline, or something else? I would call his office and I would speak to his assistant, who would transfer me to Mr. Trump, or if he called me, he would call me in my office. And did you ever speak to him on your cell phone? Yes, but very infrequently. Did you ever speak to him on his cell phone? I did, but also very infrequently. So mostly it was reach each other through your offices? That's correct. Now, you said that sometimes when you would call the office and you would speak to his assistant, can you give her U.S. name? Yes, Rona Graff. And is that his assistant at the Trump Organization? Yes, at the Trump Organization, Mr. Trump's assistant. Did you ever communicate with Mr. Trump through his bodyguard? That I have. Do you remember his bodyguard's name? Keith Schiller. And was that something that you did frequently or infrequently? Infrequently. Did Mr. Trump ever call you from Mr. Schiller's phone? I believe I spoke to him on Mr. Schiller's phone maybe one time. Okay, and were there instances where Mr. Schiller would pass messages on to you from Mr. Trump? Yes, but also infrequently. Okay, did you have occasion over the years to observe Mr. Trump's business practices? Eyes. In what context? I had a meeting with Mr. Trump in his office, and when I was there his assistant Rona brought in a batch of invoices and checks to sign. And I observed Mr. Trump. He asked me, while he was reviewing the accounts payable packages, Hugh were talking at the same time, and I noticed that he reviewed the invoice and looked at the check and then he Wuda was signing them. So on the occasion that you or the occasions that you noticed that, could you tell whether the check was stapled to the invoice or just somehow attached to it? As I recollect, the entire package was stapled together. And so you observed him reviewing what looked like an invoice and signing what looked like a check. That is correct. How would you describe withdrawn? Did you visit Mr. Trump at Trump Tower on multiple occasions? Over the years? Over the years. Eyes. How would you describe him as a businessman? I would describe Mr. Trump as very knowledgeable. I would describe him as very detail-oriented. I would describe him as almost as a micromanager from what saw that he looked at all of the aspects of whatever the issue was. How about his approach to money? I thought that his approach to money, he was very cautious and very frugal. Are you familiar with someone named Michael Cohen? Yes, Emma, who is Michael Cohen? Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's personal attorney. Do you remember when and where you met Michael Cohen? I met Michael Cohen at a bar mitzvah in early 2000. And how did you meet him? Oh, one of the vendors of our company invited me and my wife to his son's bar mitzvah, and this fellow, Wash, introduced me to Michael Cohen. Got it. Did there ever come a time when Mr. Trump also introduced you to Michael Cohen? Yes, and I was in Mr. Trump's office and he introduced me to Michael Cohen. It was in 2007. And what he said to me was, he said that he hired Michael Cohen. He lives in one of his condominiums, that he has done a lot of great things for him, and all of the contacts that I had with Mr. Trump, that now my contacts should go through Michael Cohen, and anything that I came up and told Mr. Trump about. If there were any rumors in the marketplace about Mr. Trump or his family, or any negative stories that were coming out, or anything that I heard overall that I would go through, I would call Michael Cohen directly. And that was back in 2007? Eyes. So was that before or after the bar mitzvah where you had first met Michael Cohen? Oh, 7 years after. Okay, so you had met him once before, but now Mr. Trump kind of told you he had hired him and told you about hiring him? I was surprised that I knew him before. During the period withdrawn, were you aware of what Michael Cohen's title was vis-a-vis Mr. Trump? I knew when Mr. Trump introduced Michael Cohen to me that it was his personal lawyer. That was the only title that I knew. Okay, so during the period from 2015 to 2017, I'm obviously going to keep coming back to that period. Was Michael Cohen still in that role as a personal attorney to Mr. Trump? Eyes. During that period, again, from 2015 to 2017, how frequently would you meet with Michael Cohen? I would speak to Michael Cohen probably if I had something to call him about or I heard something, I had something to discuss, probably maybe once a month, twice a quarter. And then if there was an issue or something that he wanted to follow up on or I advised him of something and we were working on it, I would speak to him more frequently. After, I think you mentioned earlier that at some point we will come back to this later, that at some point and in 2015 you told us that Mr. Trump announced his candidacy for president? That's correct. Did the frequency of contact that you had with Michael Cohen increase, decrease, or stay the same after Mr. Trump announced his candidacy? Increased. So after that presidential announcement, how often would you say that you had contact with Michael Cohen? I would say a minimum of every week, and if there was an issue, it could be daily. Do you know somebody named Hope Hicks? Yes, I do. Who is Hope Hicks? Hope Hicks was the communication director for Mr. Trump. I knew Hope Hicks also when she worked for Ivanka, for her beauty first for her fashion business. And then Hope Hicks worked for the communication company that I had at American Media the company was called Hiltzik Strategies. And Hope worked for them and worked for, his name Matthew Hiltzik, and Hope was assigned to work for Star Magazine. Now, did there come a point after Mr. Trump announced his candidacy that Hope Hicks became the communications director of the campaign? Yes, now, you mentioned in your previous answer the name Ivanka. For the record, are you referring to Ivanka Trump? I am, yes, Ivanka Trump, Mr. Trump's daughter, correct. Thank you, I am just making the record clear. Eyes. So directing your attention to early 2015, did you ever speak with the defendant about his interest in running for president? Yes, I did. And tell the jury, can you tell the jury a little bit about that? As I mentioned a little earlier, when Mr. Trump launched The Apprentice and then launched The Celebrity Apprentice, I would say the interest in Mr. Trump through my magazines, basically the National Enquirer, skyrocketed. We would do a lot of research to determine what would the proper cover of the magazine to be, to see which celebrity would sell the best. And in all of the time that every time we did this, Mr. Trump would be the top celebrity. So in some of the other pieces of the research was clear that Mr. Trump was viewed as the boss, seeing him in the boardroom, seeing him on each of the shows every week, he was the person. So I discussed with him that we did a poll in the National Enquirer about Mr. Trump running for president. Would he be? How would the readership feel? And Hayes should say the research showed that 80% of the readership of the National Enquirer would want Mr. Trump to run for president. And I passed that on, the information on to Donald Trump, and shortly after he was on, Hayes was being interviewed on the Today Show, and Matt Lauer interviewed him with respect to his aspirations of running for president. And one of the comments was about that Mr. Trump made was that this poll that was just recently done at the National Enquirer. So he cited your poll to Matt Lauer as he was flirting with the idea of running for president? Eyes. Do you remember when Mr. Trump announced that he was running for president? It was June of 2015. And how do you remember that? I was there at the announcement. How did it come to be that you were there at the announcement? I received an invitation from Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen sent me an invitation saying that there is going to be an announcement and I believe you should be there. So that's how I knew. Okay, thank you. Mr. Stanglass, Madam Clerk, I would like to display just for the witness, the parties, and the court at this time the next exhibit, or the first exhibit, which is People's 151. Bear with us while we work out this technology. Mr. Pecker, do you see anything on your screen? Yes, I do. Okay, do you recognize this exhibit, People's 151? Yes, I do. What is it? It's an email from me to Michael Cohen dated June 2nd, 2015, thanking him for thinking of me for his invitation. And then there is an invitation from Michael Cohen to me, which is the first email inviting me to the June 16th press announcement at Trump Tower at 11 o'clock. So that's the email that you were referring to? Yes. Mr. Stanglass will offer this into evidence. Mr. Zabov, no objection. The court People's 151 is accepted into evidence. Okay. Mr. Stanglass, now, please display this for everyone. Mr. Stanglass, thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to, it's a little small so I think we can blow up portions of it as we need it. Can you just tell us when you got the email? June 2nd, 2015, at 6:59 a.m. Okay, and what was the substance of the email? You can just read it to us. Oh, okay. I hope you are well. I'm sure you have seen the news about the June 16th press announcement at Trump Tower at 11 a.m. As a friend, I would love if you could make it. Let me know so I can save you a seat next to me on the atrium floor. No one deserves to be there more than you. And how was the email signed? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. I asked you how was the email signed, from whom, who signed it? Oh, from Michael Cohen. Got it, thank you. Did you go? Yes, I went. Tell us about it. I was there, I walked into Trump Tower. Michael Cohen was in the atrium, so I found him, and then I was there when Mr. Trump and Melania came down the staircase and went up to the podium. And is that when he announced his candidacy for president? Eyes. Now, again, you used the name Melania in your answer. Are you referring to Melania Trump? Melania Trump, yes. And is that the defendant's wife? Eyes. Directing your attention to a couple of months later, now in August of 2015, did there come a time when you attended a meeting in Trump Tower? Eyes. Do you remember when roughly that meeting was in August? It was the middle of August. And who was present for that meeting? Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and Hope Hicks. In and out? And was Hope Hicks there the whole time, or was she was in and out? How about Michael Cohen and Donald Trump? Were they there for the duration of the meeting? Yes. How did the meeting come about? How did you know to go? I received a call from Michael Cohen telling me that the boss wanted to see me, and that's how when I spoke to Michael Cohen, that's how he would refer to Donald Trump as the boss. What did you understand the purpose of the meeting to be before you actually got there? Most of the time when I received a call from Michael Cohen, he wanted something, so I assumed that they were going to ask I was going to be asked for something. I didn't know what it was before I got there. Well, can you describe for the jury what happened at that meeting, please? At that meeting, Donald Trump and Michael, they asked me what can I do and what my magazines could do to help the campaign. So thinking about it, as I did previously, I said what I would do is I would run or publish positive stories about Mr. Trump and I would publish negative stories about his opponents. And I said that I would also be the eyes and ears of I said I would be your eyes and ears because I know that the Trump organization had a very small staff. And then I said that anything that I hear in the marketplace, if I hear anything negative about yourself or if I hear anything about women selling stories, I would notify Michael Cohen, as I did over the last several years. I would notify Michael Cohen and then he would be able to have them killed in another magazine or have them not be published or somebody would have to purchase them. Purchase the negative stories about Mr. Trump so that they would not get published, you mean? That they would not get published, yes. So I want to break that down a little bit. First of all, when you offered withdrawn. So you offered to publish positive stories about Mr. Trump? Eyes. To publish negative stories about his opponents? Eyes. And to alert him through Michael Cohen when you came across damaging information, particularly regarding women? Eyes. And the idea was that so Mr. Trump and Mr. Cohen could prevent that information from being publicized? Eyes. So you mentioned women in particular. What made you the one who raised that? Did somebody else raise that? Can you explain to the jury how the topic of women in particular came up? Well, in a presidential campaign I was the person that thought that there would be a lot of women come out to try to sell their stories, because Mr. Trump was well known as the most eligible bachelor and dated the most beautiful women. And it was clear that based on my past experience, that when someone is running for a public office like this, it is very common for these women to call up a magazine like the National Enquirer to try to sell their stories. Or I would hear it in the marketplace through other sources that stories are being marketed. Did you have or express any ideas about how you may be able to help deal with those stories by women? All I said was I would notify Michael Cohen. What about Bill and Hillary Clinton? Did their names up during this meeting? Eyes. Can you explain how? As I mentioned earlier, my having the National Enquirer, which is a weekly magazine, and you focus on the cover of the magazine and who and what is the story that is the topic of the week. The Hillary running for president and Bill Clinton's womanizing was one of the biggest sales I had for the National Enquirer and the other tabloids. That's the other things that the readers wanted to read about, and that's what I would sell weekly. So I was running the Hillary Clinton stories. I was running Hillary as an enabler for Bill Clinton with respect to all of the womanizing. And ways it was easy for me to say that I'm going to continue running those type of stories for the National Enquirer. And did you believe that that would help Mr. Trump's campaign? I think was a mutual benefit. It would help his campaign. It would also help me. Okay, I'm going to come back to that and ask you to elaborate a little bit more. Okay. But specifically for the coverage of Hillary Clinton as an enabler of Bill Clinton's womanizing, that was your focus? Yes, that's what I said. How, if at all, did Mr. Trump react to your suggestion that you would continue to do that? He was pleased. Did you discuss it at any greater length? As I recollect, he was pleased.